Hello, and thank you so much for joining us for another Rise Innovation interview. Today, I have a very special guest and friend of mine. His name is Preetham. How do you pronounce your last name? Because I don't want to butcher it. Is it Vishwantha?
Vishwanatha.
Vishwanatha. Preetham Vishwanatha, thank you so much for being here. Preetham is the founder of Kena.AI and an artificial music platform for learners, teachers, practitioners, composers, and publishers of music across all genres, cultures, and instruments. I've had the pleasure of speaking and being on stage on Clubhouse with Preetham, and he is a wealth of knowledge and definitely in the forefront of innovation and technology. So I'm sure he's going to have a lot to contribute to you kind of starting your innovation process. So first of all, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being on.
Thank you so much, Sal. Really appreciate it and humbled with the kind words. It's been a while on Clubhouse, and it's a pleasure to be jamming with you on the Rise interview.
Yeah, it's amazing. Thank you so much. So for my audience that's watching this, both in the Rise Innovation platform and on YouTube, who are you and kind of what are you about better than the job that I've done as an introduction?
I believe that I'm a technologist at heart and more entrepreneurial in my exploration towards applying the concepts of utilitarianism or innovation to do good for the society. That's the whole holy grail. My journey started in 1993. Started as a programmer. The first third of my career have been in hardcore tech as systems architect. Worked for Damstart University on formal concept analysis and data mining solutions. Second part of my career, I was into technology, large-scale technology transformation programs as chief architect for Centrata, enterprise architect for NewScale, which got bought over by Cisco. Was a director of engineering at Cisco for a while. The recent third has been more entrepreneurial. This is my third startup. Kena.AI is the third startup, but the prior attempts has been into retail space. Built a startup in the retail supply side, sold it to a conglomerate, tried to build something in the retail demand side, failed miserably, lost all the money that I made on the first startup, had to go join a very large mobile ad tech player, world's largest mobile ad tech player in Mobi as VP of AI. Was there for about 6.5 years, fully vested, wanted to do something, went and joined a large edtech unicorn called Coursera, built their AI group from ground up. But I had this itch that I had to scratch, which was around music. So over the last 2 years, I've been working as a founder and CEO for Kena. At Kena, started this. The idea is to actually build an artificial intelligence music teacher and also a AI music composer, which can help augment the strengths, either for a music teacher or a composer, not to replace them. And hence, Kena, we believe that we give superpowers to music teachers, and it's a marketplace that we are developing. So that's pretty much it.
And there's innovation in all factors now going around with AI, especially with a lot of pre-trained models. What is specifically, how can somebody utilize Kena.AI to enhance their music experience, the composing, the teaching?
Yeah, no, I think the premise of using Kena is fairly simple. If you have a music teacher, you probably go to the music teacher once or twice a week. That's probably 2 hours. But music is a practitioner's art. It's not something that you can actually just go to a music teacher for a couple of hours and learn. You have to practice at least 4 hours a week. So what do you do when your music teacher is not around and you're practicing at home and you don't have skilled parents or siblings or friends that you jam with? That's pretty much the premise of Kena, where we actually are around, listening to you practice and give you feedback, human-like feedback, like how your music teacher would, based on either the curriculum or the sheet music or the guidelines that's set by that human teacher, where we auto-grade, we provide assessments, we provide feedback to any genre and any instrument of music that you accomplish to practice. So that's the premise of Kena. We extend which is what we mean by we provide we enable superpowers to the music teachers, because they can only be training probably somewhere between 10 to 40 kids, 40 students per week. We give them the ability to scale beyond 500,000 people, so that the assessments and auto grading can be done by the machines and enable interventions where it's required.
So kind of streamlining the process.
Yeah.
Like you have now teachers that will get. I'm not sure if you remember, but I was working on a health app before, and it was about similar. Like it was streamlining kind of the processes that are happening now, and giving the ability for medical it's patient monitoring, but for in your case it'll be music monitoring, right? Like you monitor through an audio analytics program or such. Kind of, do they hit the right notes? Do they? And then if they fail these grades, then the teacher will step in and try kind of help it, giving the teacher more time and more ability to teach more, which is amazing. I mean, you think if Mozart was able to teach a lot more people, where would music be today? So I love kind of the whole idea and concept of it. So what has kind of been an innovation that kind of blew you away while working on this project or any other project?
In music, more specifically?
In music, yeah, I love it.
Yeah, no, I think primarily the recent developments that is happening in music arena is the ability of AI to actually create music akin to or surpassing human creativity, at least when it comes to the instrumental genre, if not lyrical and vocal genre, right? So primarily, if you think about the jukebox or Google Magenta, what it can do today is you can provide few tokens. You can say, hey, here's a few tokens as an initial part of Mozart or Rachmaninoff, and here's an initial part of Justin Bieber, and primarily, can you come up with something which combine the jukebox can actually go ahead and do that. But it wasn't it was hitting that uncanny valley. You could still listen to it and say there's something wrong with this. It doesn't feel right. So that blew my mind. But we the compositions or the compositional creativity that we embarked on is how to actually get over this uncanny valley and make it similar to human generated music. How to provide the finesse and the contours. So that's the work that we are doing as innovation. We call it the music neural engine or the music expression graph. What does feel human, and what is it that kind of befuddles when humans listen to an AI playing music, and they can actually almost tell today that it is by AI, is something that we're working on. I had given some examples where I played the music compositions that our AI has been generating, and people couldn't actually discern between it. So that's some of the innovations that we're working on. But these are like exponential innovations, and this does take time to materialize in the market. So we will just call it inventions and not innovations yet, but we'll get there.
Yeah, I love it. I think that idea of building something that can take context of two musical forms and then connect them and make something of its own is kind of the power of AI in general. You can give an AI context enough of it and kind of mix these data points together to come up with something super creative. I love it. So what is innovation actually? I ask all guests this because it's really interesting. There's a lot of perspective around innovation as a whole. What does innovation mean to you?
Innovation is anything that has to increase value to the society, right? I mean, so invention and ideas are not innovation, and I'm very, very particular when I actually talk about innovation versus ideas and inventions. Inventions are something where you have a breakthrough or disruptive idea to do things faster, smarter, cheaper. But if that does not get commercialized, and I'm very careful when I use the word commercialization. I'm not talking about monetization. I'm talking about the commerce as a value to increase the utilitarian societal value overall. If that doesn't materialize, that invention is not called innovation. So for me, innovation is you take a new novel idea and you commercialize at large.
At scale.
at scale, and bring some alternative values, or bring significant differences in how you actually conduct life, is what innovation is all about. And of course, there's a process, there's an innovator's mindset, there's a innovator's dilemma, there's ethics and ramifications. But at the end of the day, as long as you can actually bring significant value with your new ideas, then you're actually innovating.
I love it. So it doesn't matter how small in your mind the innovation is, if it gets commercialized at scale, right?
Yeah, and commercialization can mean that you're actually working on sustained innovation, which means you're just improving an existing product, or you're doing disruptive innovation, which has its own dilemmas. Mostly today, disruptive innovations or exponential innovations are called innovations, and sustained innovation is just called product improvements. But when a product is 90% there, it takes a lot of innovation to even increase it by 1%.
Oh yeah.
Innovation is still innovation in my books.
Yeah, and a lot of people don't consider the amount of training and fine tuning and the amount of actual processing power that's required to run some of these models. I think there's a lost art in it, and it's weird because people, oh well, it does this, well another thing does this too, and like no, it's trained differently, it acts differently, it behaves differently based on the data points that you provided, like context. So we talked about this, so this was like a hot topic for us in that 50-something hour conversation that we had about AI ethics, and the conversation was called the illusion of AI ethics, right?
Right.
The illusion of explainability, I believe that was right. the exact name. But so it's interesting to me. So what are some inspiring words that you would have to people who are trying to innovate, whether it's the Rise members or our YouTube audience, if they have an idea? Like for me, I always say this is the best time, right? Like this is the first time kind of in our history that there isn't a lot of hardware bottlenecks. You need a lot of hardware, but the hardware is not, dropping data packets, and you're able to process information a little bit more accurate than you were before. Because most of what we call the silent AI revolution was around fixing the hardware and giving us enough resources to run the models that we're able to run today. So like there's this huge advantage to innovating today in high tech, because when you're working on the bleeding edge, you're really ahead of everybody. And I know I have a lot of artificial intelligence conversation with laymen, people who are not technologically savvy. And one of our goals for our company is to work on an innovative way to bring voice commands to every technological gap. It's very important for me to have complete inclusion into the marketplace, because whether you knew or not, about 65% of the US population will be over 65 in the next 10 years. That means there's going to be a huge gap in technology, which is not good for the economy, for sustainability, for the whole thing. So I think that AI definitely will resolve some of these issues. What would you say to the future audience that want to innovate and are thinking, maybe I should get into the tech area, or maybe I should learn a new skill, maybe I should kind of get into this? What would be your recommendations, inspiring words?
So innovation does not necessarily mean technological innovation, as in everybody should learn programming, everybody needs to understand the empirical math behind it. Innovation has many different flavors, and it today especially exponential innovation actually gives rise to many different domains of expertise that is required to contain that innovation. Work in the areas of policy making, work in the areas of how to actually go ahead and incentivize for good behavior, work in the area of thinking through radicalization, work in the area of linguistic inclusion, work in the area of diversity. When we use the word inclusivity, we are talking about would this create digital divide, not just from the perspective of the people who have and have nots of economic disparity, but also in terms of race and so on and so forth, language. How do you reduce the unintentional consequences of innovation is also part of innovation, because if you're not thinking about the teleos. I mean, the teleological argument about innovation is to do the greatest good for the society, which is based on the premise of utilitarianism, right? Egoism was, when you think about innovation from an egoistic perspective, you're saying, how do I maximize my revenues? That is me as an organization. How do I actually maximize the revenue of my stakeholder? That is still egoism. But utilitarianism is, how do I maximize outside my stakeholders, people, the unintentional, how do I reduce the unintentional consequences? So that is still innovation. So I think that when people hear about the word innovation, they should not only think about, oh, do I know how to code in Python, or what's going to happen to me if I don't understand the math? They need to start thinking about, the ramifications, especially in biotech, especially when you're talking about genetic privacy. When you have wristwatch and wearable computers, you're now talking about genetic privacy, not just talking about data privacy from the perspective of demographic or psychographic privacy, right? So you need people and policymakers and the netizens to actually bring together the concept of not just how to innovate, whether to innovate, and how to sustain the impact of that innovation for the society at large. And when you're scaling that, and I think the audience should start thinking about, what are my strengths? Is my strength in communication? Is my strength in social skills? Is my strength more in terms of persuasive arguments, so that I can actually work with policymakers? Is my strength more in terms of financial planning, to actually understand the impact of this economically? And of course, the strength in terms of bias and inclusivity, strength in terms of philosophy of innovation, where people can actually ask metaphysical or metaethical questions to say, what does it mean in terms of machine morality? I mean, there's beyond just the valley echo chamber of, oh, you need to know math and coding to innovate. There's a whole host of things that exist out there, which requires the society to start wrapping their head around.
I totally agree. And, I had Chris Mattman from NASA on the show a few episodes back, and he said it's not about STEM workforce, it's about STEAM workforce. I think everybody has to get involved, and arts is a very, very important piece of the puzzle. And you have to look at everything. And this brings me right into my next question. When you're developing, when you're innovating, there's a lot of people that are starting to work with this technology, and some, remember that you need to look to the experts and ask them for advice when you get stuck on stuff. Look at the data governance. I attended a bunch of UN meetings about data governance and how it's going to play out in the future. It's important to know, when getting into new technologies, kind of the ramifications of the technology that you're working for. A lot of times we forget that there's humans in the way. It's not just technology. So we have to include ourselves in any software that we develop as a whole, and make sure that it does no harm and contributes back to society. How do you handle unforeseen circumstances that arise? Because when you're working with bleeding edge technology, Facebook, I always use it as an example, didn't intend to make people depressed, but today it's literally a side effect of their software. And how do you prevent that, or how do you mitigate that, or how do you attack it when it arises?
I think risk management is always a challenge. Primarily, you cannot always have a plan in terms of mitigating risk, because black swan events requires, at least according to Nazim Nicholas Taleb, you need some amount of anti-fragility to be built, not stability, but how do you actually be anti-fragile? It's there's enough theories and enough lip service that's been done around it, but it's really a hard challenge when you're actually in the driving seat of innovation, especially in the forefront of AI or exponential technologies for such large companies. It's hard to think about unforeseen risk, because there. I mean, if you can, it's not called unforeseen if you can foresee it.
That's right.
And that's the challenge, right? If I don't know what I don't know, how would I behave? How would I even innovate? So that becomes, as I said, meta ethics, and that becomes philosophical. Then you talk about epistemological approaches in terms of how is there an alternative use case in terms of how this was mitigated, let's say in nuclear space or in genetic space, and what were the learnings from that? The only challenge there is that you use past data to predict future. You're equating future is somehow equal to past, and that may not be necessarily true. So what you need is future data to predict future, and it's not accessible.
Not yet.
Not yet, right? So past data is normative. Everybody has access to it, and of course, there's challenges in terms of mitigating bias. How do you manage unforeseen risks? Just have a strong moral attitude, strong moral grounding and principles, and assume that when the unforeseen risks become foreseen, you make the right decisions quickly, right? So there should be simple rules. You need to make decisions quickly. You should be, and the decision should be for the greater good. You should be able to kill the cash cows when the unforeseen situations actually come up and say, hey, what you're doing is wrong. You should have the moral grounding to say, yes, I understand it. I'm going to shut it down. That's the only way to approach unforeseen situations. Of course, easier said than done when you have a larger set of stakeholders to answer to. But I would say choose your stakeholders carefully so that you can morally ground everybody, and make sure that you're constantly asking critical questions in everything that you do. Sometimes sharpen the saw. I mean, take time. Don't keep running. Take some rest.
I love that.
Think about something that you're working on.
It's good advice. Sometimes you're so entrenched that you miss stuff. A lot of times taking a step back, kind of a day or two to kind of refocus and reset, and then look at it with kind of clean view, things become a little bit more clearly. So I love it. Great advice. All right, what is the last final words that you have to say to the audience before we wrap up? Anything that you would recommend for them to read or see or think about?
Yeah, no, I think if you haven't started reading and understanding what philosophy is, what does philosophy and technology mean? If you haven't started reading and understanding what ethics means, this is about time, because I think that's one part that we miss out when in the rat race, where we think philosophy is only for abstract, airy people. It is not. Philosophy is the way of life. It's the way you actually conduct yourself, and it teaches you a lot in terms of how to think. It gives you a lot of tool. The tool is called logic, and the tool is called analytical thinking, and applying that requires understanding what philosophy is, what ethics is. Start reading that, participating in that, get a crash course, no matter what domain you're working on, and the rest will follow.
I love it. Great advice. Where can people find more about you?
Mostly on. I used to be on Clubhouse, but I'm burned out. I respond on Twitter. I respond on my LinkedIn. Write to me at Preetham at Kena.AI, Preetham at Kena.AI, and I'm available.
Perfect. Thank you so much for joining us for this Rise Innovation interview series, and we will see you guys on the next one.
Appreciate it, Sal. Have a good one.